Okay.
Forgive me for enjoying some popcorn, but I'm preparing for the learning.
The all-night learning.
That's right.
Right, because all year long you don't nash a lot. You're not sure how to do it. You have to get yourself back into the rhythm of nashing.
Exactly.
Get ready to pull an all-nighter, Ruvain.
So, we're now living in Florida through a very hot real estate market. And it's very common that, you see something, a deal on the market, and before you know it, it's gone. Right? That's the nature of the beast. But imagine what it feels like to come across a property that nobody wants. Right? Nobody wants. Everybody's declining it. What's your first gut tell you? Give it a pass, right? Give it a pass. Nobody wants it. But if you think about it, we got no deal when we got the Torah. We were experiencing something very similar to that. Before Hashem approached the Jewish people, Klal Yisrael, to offer us the Torah, Hashem circled through all the nations of the world, or at least some of the prominent nations in the world, to offer them the Torah. And after everybody rejected Hashem's overture, Hashem's offer, all for a variety of reasons, each one zeroing in on something in the Torah that didn't please them, then Hashem comes to the Jewish people and offers it. We were given we were the last ones given the opportunity. Let's read the Medrash inside. We're calling this the deal without benefits. So this is a text from the Medrash Sifri of the Devarim. I'll read it inside and we'll discuss it. When God offered the Torah to Israel, he offered it not to Israel alone, but to all the nations. First, God went to the descendants of Esau and said to them, will you accept the Torah? They asked, what's written in it? They replied, don't murder. They said, murder, master of the universe. The very identity of Esav, our father, is to murder, is to be a hunter. We cannot accept the Torah. I'm sorry. Find somebody else. God went to the descendants of Ammon and Moab and said to them, will you accept the Torah? They asked, what's in it? God said, don't commit adultery. They said, master of the world, the very identity of our people comes from sexual immorality. It's in the history of Ammon and Moab. This is with Lot and his daughters. The immoral union said, we cannot accept this from the Torah. Find somebody else. So then they go to the descendants of Ishmael and said to them, will you accept the Torah? They said, what's written in it? God said, you should not steal. And they said, master of the world, the very identity of our father is theft. We cannot accept the Torah. This is our way of life. This is what we do. Find somebody else. There's no nation that God did not approach to ask if they wanted the Torah. So, after having solicited every other nation, being met with utter refusal or rejection, God goes to the Jews. Do you want the Torah? You know what they said?
No.
How much is it? God said it's free. They said, we'll take 2. And that's why we ended up with the 2 tablets. But on a serious note, that's a classical one. But on a serious note, the Jewish people answered unconventionally. They didn't say, like all the other nations, what does it say in it? They said the famous words that echoes through the generations, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. What does it mean we will do and we will hear? So there's really 2 ways of understanding the Jewish people's response. One response was, we will do, we will hear. What? A simple level. We will accept it. We commit to following in the Torah's footsteps, the Torah's instructions. As far as what does it say in the Torah, does it speak about murder, theft, so on and so forth, we will hear. That we place secondarily. We're not making our action contingent on knowing what's in it. You're offering us the Torah. You know, when you buy real estate, there's a concept called, you know, sometimes you make it subject to inspection, and sometimes the home sale goes, they call it as is. That means go look at it, go for the viewing. You like it, take it, not. Don't tell me inspections and gonna check the electrical and the plumbing. Take it as it is. So the Jewish people said, Naaseh v'nishma. It's basically signing onto the deal as is. What about the details? What does it have inside it? What about unpacking it, knowing what it's all about? We're accepting it unequivocally. We will find out afterwards what it says. We will follow regardless. There's also a deeper interpretation, which is nishma means to hear. Doesn't just mean to hear and to know what it says in there, what's packed into this book, and what does it require of us, but also nishma will understand and appreciate. In other words, the Jewish people are saying that we're not making our acceptance of the Torah contingent on how deeply or how much we appreciate the values of the Torah, if it's hip enough for the time that we're in, if it's cool enough, what our neighbors are going to say, does it jive with our this, that, or the other? No, regardless of what kind of appreciation at any given point we have for the Torah, we'll accept it. So those are the two layers of Naaseh v'nishma we will do and we will hear. Yes, clear? So, so the question that we should all ask, that every Jew should ask, because being a Jew rests on this pillar, rests on this very idea. This is at the heart of what it means to be a Jew. So therefore, this is a question that must be explored. This is something that should trouble a modern man and woman. Deeply troubling, in fact. The fact that our ancestors accepted the Torah blindly, considering the fact that the Torah is ultimately a life-altering document, right? It makes various requirements of us, how to live, demands of our life. It's very impactful in our day-to-day operations, as you would say, right? So in your own life, do you ever remember signing a contractual agreement for a lifetime of service that covers every detail of your life without reading the contract? No. Have you ever done something equivalent to that?
Getting married?
Marriage.
Ah, you guys are good. But in general, we would avoid doing anything like that as long as our lawyer is at our side. As long as our lawyer is at our side, they would prevent us and forbid us for signing a contract that's not read. Right? It's rule number one in business. What's even more puzzling, not just that the Jewish people sign a contract unread, or as we say in the field, in the industry, sight unseen, right? Equivalent of it. Not just that, we hold it up as a virtue. We're proud of it. We talk about it. The Jewish people said, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will hear. We're proud of it. You know, this makes a mockery of us. It makes us seem the most primitive people of all time. What does that mean? You accepted a whole code of life and living without knowing what's in there? What are you, an idiot? What are you, a primitive caveman? Right? If you explain it to somebody what that is, you explain to an average modern man or woman what the Jewish people did, it would elicit a lot of question marks, to say the least. So this is a point that must be explored, because at the heart of this resides, like I said, so much of what it means to be Jewish. So therefore, it's not just a rhetorical question, it's a question that's important for us. As we mature and develop in our bond, in our relationship, and our Judaism, this is something that needs to be explored and understood so we can properly relate to this. You know, after they first, they say a funny story. share with you the point, the kernel of the answer to this question is in the opening statement of God giving us the Torah. But first, I want to share with you a funny story. So the story is when they had the first airplane, fully automatic airplane. We haven't gotten there yet, but the first fully automatic airplane that has ever flown, the passengers, when they got on the plane, they hear a computer-generated voice over the loudspeakers. And it goes like this: ladies and gentlemen, this is your automatic pilot speaking. In my modern and carefully tested system, an error is absolutely impossible, absolutely impossible, absolutely impossible. Like that?
Yes.
So when you get on the airplane, what do you hear? Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. It's always the exact same phrase. Never does he get on and say, I am your captain. Right?
Right.
Doesn't get up and say, what did they say in the South? When they came to Florida, what did they tell me? Hey, y'all. I'm your captain. I'm going to give you a rocky ride today. They don't say that. They say, this is your captain speaking. But for some reason, when God got up on Mount Sinai, as you can see in the background, you see that?
Yep.
See Mount Sinai there?
I
And
like
he was
the
ready
fire.
to share with us the 10 Commandments. He did not get up and say, this is your God speaking. Hear ye, ladies and gentlemen, this is your God speaking. He didn't say that. What did he say?
I am ye God.
He said in Hebrew, it's Anochi Hashem Elokecha. In English, I am your God. Obviously, this is the way God chose to open up. Why did he choose to open up in that way? He certainly wasn't trained in pilot school because he didn't use their customary verbiage. Although certainly God is taking us for a long ride. So he chose instead to say, I'm saying it in a positive sense, not in a facetious sense. He didn't choose to say, this is your God speaking, but rather, I am the Lord your God. So Hasidus explains that this is a very, very important choice beginning for God's opening statement. Why? Because when you say the word I, not the I that comes before the pad, iPad, but you're talking about, and you're referring to, I should say, something very deep. You're referring to, when you're saying it with careful calculation, you're not just throwing it around, but if it's a choice expression, you're actually referring to the very depth of you, who you are, your essence. Not the part of you that can be described, defined, captured, normally understood or related to, but something that's very, very deep within. The quintessential I we're talking about. At my core, this is a very deep concept, but it's very simple, but very deep. At the core of each of us, right? There's only me, there's no one else there. No one else exists in the space. We're only me, deep, deep down. It's the place where I get to be me, fully comfortable, without pretense, without any consideration for anybody else, without any regard for others. We each have a space like that inside of us that we guard jealously. We keep it heavily guarded. Nobody else is allowed to go in there. We don't let anybody else in.
I don't believe.
Good evening, Heidi, welcome. So, normally, who are we and who do people see in us as people? So it really depends. It depends what the relationship is, because normally in the way in which we relate to others is a more external place that we're operate from. So, and we adapt ourselves according to that relationship and according to that demand and according to the people that we're relating to. Our friends, for example, are relating to our social side. There's a social side of us. And our family relates to our emotional side, right? And our teachers relate to our intellectual selves. And our colleagues relate to our professional selves, right? There's so many different facets to our life, to our being, right? We are all here in this class together now. We all know each other in some way. But there are other people in your life that know you in an entirely different light. But none of these, all of these descriptions that we gave, the intellectual part, the emotional part, the professional side, you're a doctor during the day, you're a father and a spouse, a husband in the evening, you're an intellectual when you go to your occasional classes, etc., etc. There's so many different facets to you. But none of these are your true self. The person who is social and the person who's intellectual and the person who's emotional, the essence of the person is not coming out in any of those moments. When we get to be ourselves in a place where nobody else is, a place from which we're not interacting with others, that is an entirely different thing. There's the core who we are that is beyond all of those descriptions, beyond all of those boxes or facets. There's something much, much deeper. And that part of ourself is not a part of ourself that could be described. Because whenever we're describing something, think for a second. If somebody were to describe you, or when you describe a friend of yours, inevitably you're describing something they do, or some role that they perform, or some responsibility they carry. But it's not you. It's not the essence of you. It's a part of you that others people see. You, the essence of you, the quintessential you, is a part of you that from which that external connection is not operating from. That's a part of you that nobody sees. It's a part of you that is heavily guarded. It's a part of you that cannot be described. And that's why a person who's no longer a parent, or a person who's no longer a professional, a person who's no longer going to study, still exists and still maintains their identity and their essence. They don't cease to exist when a particular role ceases to be. Why is this relevant? Let's now translate this to the time God gave us the Torah at Mount Sinai. What happened at Mount Sinai? At Mount Sinai, God himself revealed himself to us in his entire glory and splendor. The entire essence of God was revealed. It was the first time that ever happened that God expressed and revealed his essential self. We often think about, I'm sure you came across this idea that the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all studied Torah. We know even Noah studied Torah, right? How do we know that Noah studied Torah? Because he knew to take a certain amount of kosher animals into the ark versus non-kosher animals. He only took 2 a pair. The kosher animals, he took 7. How did he know it was kosher? Those were one of the many, many instances in which we see that the knowledge of Torah has been around before the Torah was given. So then the natural question is, if the awareness and the knowledge of Torah was present beforehand, we always thought at the moment God gave the Torah as a transactional moment, the moment in which God gave us the Torah, which is a body of knowledge, which is information, right? God shared with us all this information. And the question is, it's not true. This information was available to us before. Abraham studied Torah, Isaac studied Torah, Jacob studied Torah. So what really happened when God gave us the Torah? What happened at Mount Sinai? What was so novel about that moment? And what was novel about that moment is that God presented himself to us. He didn't say, this is your captain speaking. This is your God speaking. God would be describing himself. This is my role. Instead, God chose an opposite approach. God said, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. God chose to begin with the word I, the quintessential I. God sought to present his very core and essence to us at Mount Sinai, and that was groundbreaking. That was revolutionary. Never before was there such a revelation, such a moment that God shared with us his most intimate self. He didn't share it with the previous greats and tzaddikim and righteous people. So why did God share with us his intimate self, which he has never shared before? There was some revelation in previous generations. God revealed himself to Noah, but there was also a concealment at the same time. There wasn't a full exposure, right? God did not fully present himself to Noah and to Adam. There was a veil remained. God's essence didn't come forth. Some, like when you present yourself at work, you put on a suit and tie, right? And you try to sound very professional until you come home and you act very sloppy, right? That's what your wife would say. You don't clean up after dinner. You leave it. You leave a little bit of toothpaste in the sink, right? I know all that stuff. So the point is, when you come to work, you present yourself a certain way. When you come to class, you present yourself another way. When you come to a family party, you present yourself another way. Hashem always presented himself to us in various facets. But when it came Mount Sinai, he said, I am the Lord your God. When you come to work, you say, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a this, I'm a that. You're describing things you do. This is your captain speaking. You're describing your role. When God came in Mount Sinai, he didn't start with any introduction. I'm this, I'm that. He started, I am the Lord your God. Oh no, he, the quintessential I. I'm putting it before you. I'm sharing it with you. That's amazing. Why did God do it? Why did he decide to do that at that moment? And the answer is profound and simple at the same time. And I'm going to share this point with a question. With whom do you share your essence? Is there anybody in the universe with whom you share your essence? Anybody?
Each other.
Each other?
Each other, like with anybody other?
No, husband and wife.
You share your essence with your spouse, with your husband, with your wife, right? You don't share it with anybody else. You even don't share it with a parent often. To that extent, certainly not. So there's one person who you share your essence with. The person you share your life with, you build a family with, the person you marry. That's the only person you share your essence with. That's the person you become most vulnerable in front of, the person that knows every weakness and every strength of yours, right? It's something that stands apart of any other relationship that exists. So let's take a look at, let's analyze it for a moment. A wedding is the most happy occasion, right? There's no doubt. Why is it a happy occasion? It should be a very sad occasion. After all, a man and woman had a perfectly free life, and they're about to throw away their independence, and they're about to throw away their freedom and become indentured to each other. It should be a time that we sit and cry. And yet we sit and dance and we sing and dance and we drink and we eat the wedding cake. You just lost all your freedoms. And you're celebrating? What gives? We don't often ask that question. And we don't often think about it in that way. But why are we celebrating? I think it's a question that's worth exploring because it will be enlightening in our relationship with God. And the answer is that the essence of marriage is not two people who throw away their freedom. It's rather two people that are establishing connection. That's the essence of marriage. We're celebrating the two people bonded together in a unique bond that doesn't parallel any other bond. So there are many kinds of relationships. No relationships have the depth and the grandeur of marriage. There isn't another kind of relationship that has that kind of depth. With nobody else in our life, in our world, we share our deepest self, right? Our social bond has limits, and if somebody tries to explore too much, right? If they get too personal, we put up boundaries. If our space is invaded, we let them know that it's been invaded, right? So there's always boundaries. With a spouse, it's the unique relationship in which we share everything about ourselves. No other relationship has that. A spouse is different. A spouse is invited into our deepest self. And that is a space that is kept jealously closed and hidden for years, from the time we're born until we enter the relationship of marriage for the first time in our life, that we share that depth, the essence of who we are. The place where we reserve, where we're only ourselves. That's the essence of marriage. That's the essence of the relationship of marriage. So we're inviting somebody to be with us in a manner in which we touch each other's essence. We connect with each other. We connect with each other's essence. This was an aha moment from today's class. You ready? In a marriage, man and woman become one. The problem begins when they try to figure out which one. Because the beauty of marriage is when you become one and there's no beginning and there's no end. You touch each other's essence, and from that point of essence, your life is now one. It's something unique and unparalleled. So when we want to explore that question we had, why is a wedding a joyous occasion? Because two people invite each other into the most sacred part of their self. And such an invitation by the person we love is overwhelming. It's humbling. It's inspiring. It's joyous. I wouldn't say joyous. I would say joy inspiring. It's profound, and it's something that's cherished for a lifetime. And therefore, friends and family join us to rejoice the bride and groom who have engaged in this special gift of a lifetime, the gift of giving the deepest part of yourself, and sharing it with the person in your life, like a man and woman. Just like a man and woman share their essence with each other, it's the very same thing when it comes to the Torah, when it comes to God and our relationship with God in Mount Sinai. You see, Sinai is like the marriage of God and the Jewish people. As we discussed many times, Hashem chose, the Torah chooses to describe the relationship of God and the Jewish people as a husband and wife. And Hashem is saying, I want to be your God, and I want you to be my people. I want to have your hand in marriage. I want to be one with you. Hashem, for the first time, pulled off the veil, exposed himself, his essence, to his beloved, to the Jewish people, who he loved so much, loves so much, and wants forever to be connected with them in a bond that is unbreakable and inseparable. And for that, Hashem made himself vulnerable, if you will, pulled off that veil and exposed his vulnerability to us. What is the vulnerability? Could God ever be vulnerable? We're going to discuss that vulnerability in a moment, but in essence, a husband and wife put their own self at the other's mercy. Our happiness is now in the hands of another person and vice versa. So I put myself in Hashem's hands and Hashem puts himself in our hands. I trust you with my most vulnerable and intimate self and private treasure. Are you willing to have me? That's what's happening. At Mount Sinai, Hashem made a proposal. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God. Hashem put his essence out there, put himself on the table. Hashem made the proposal. And what did we do? We accepted the proposal. We said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. You see, 5 weeks earlier, the giving of the Torah, Mount Sinai moment, wasn't a blind marriage. We actually had courtship. We actually have gone through, one second, let me get some. We actually had gone on a couple of dates with God. 5 weeks before the Jews got the Torah, they were stood at the Sea of Reeds a week after they left Egypt. And Hashem made a miraculous, wondrous event, split the Sea of Reeds. And what did the Jews say? They recognized God. They said, Zeh Keli ve'anvehu. This is my God, and I will glorify him. They recognize God. They recognize his mighty hand. So there's a fascinating little nuance here. It doesn't say, this is our God. The Jewish people stood at the Sea of Reeds, where they just experienced a miracle. They were in amazement, the wonder, they were wowed. They should have said, this is our God. They're a collective people. They said, this is my God. Already at that moment, when they said, this is my God, they have already kind of indicated, they've given their clue, because when you propose, you want to know that the other person's on the same page, right? So you always want to have a clue before you propose that the other person's ready, right? The worst thing you can do is propose and the other person's not ready for it, they don't know, and they catch them flat-footed. So they already gave their clue to God that they want to have this relationship. This is my God, and I glorify him. So then, when Mount Sinai came and God made the proposal and offered his hand in marriage, offered his essence to us, we embraced it and we said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. We were prepared to accept that relationship because that's what we were looking for. They cherished this opportunity to finally have that kind of intimate relationship with Hashem. We still didn't answer our first question fully, and that is, how could people, intelligent people in their right mind, accept a contract sight unseen, accept a contract that they have not read? They don't know what it entails. They don't know what it involves. You never know if one of the 613 commandments might say that you have to stand on your head for 3 hours a day, or that you have to go chop wood every other day. And what happens if you don't know how to use an axe? You don't like chopping wood. or if you're a tree hugger, right? So what do you do then? So that was the original question. How could you accept without reading the contract? Jewish people were the only people who didn't tell God, what does it say in the Torah? And speculate and analyze whether or not they want to accept it. That's the question we asked. So let's come back to that question now. But before we do that, any questions? Before we go further, any questions, any comments, objections?
I have one.
Sure.
If the Torah was already there, okay, I'll accept that. And it's been offered to all these other people or groups or whatever. What did God do? Did he just walk up to them and say, hey, here's the Torah. You want it? With
Yeah,
the
so
Jewish
you
people,
want to know,
he created a vision that how would you refuse it?
right.
10 magnificent what do you call them? Blank
Commandments.
that
Oh,
he
10
gets,
plagues, right.
them out of Egypt. He opens up the sea. I mean, at that point, you gotta say, this guy's got something, you know.
Right. Yeah, so the manner in which he made the offer, I don't know if he did it in person. We met him on the street, or if it was through text messaging. But all kidding aside, there were these nations that all had their ingrained behaviors. We all do. We all have our shortcomings. We all have our faults. But essentially, they each, while on the one hand might have been tempted to engage, to accept the Torah, to bite, as we would say, to bite on the deal, but at the same time, I guess they weren't prepared to alter their behavior. They resisted the relationship because it would require of them to make change in their life that they weren't ready to do. And the Jewish people essentially said, the relationship is such an opportunity. This bond is so great. Marriage is such a deep and profound experience that I'm accepting it. And I'll live with whatever it comes with. Essentially, that's what they said. Right? There are many people today, it's rather a large trend, that don't want to get married. Many people, they say that the divorce rate is down today. And the reason why it's down, not because less people are getting divorced, is because less people are getting married. Right? People are having relationships, but preferring not to get married. What's the reason why people don't get married? It's because they get caught up or get too concerned or are risk adverse. They don't want to take a risk of being required to change, not risk adverse, but they don't want to make changes in their life. They don't want to be required to make changes in their life. The Jewish people didn't make that calculation. They figured that this relationship is special, is unique, and they were eager to have it. Will it require to make changes in our life? So let's explore that now. I want to explore that point now. Let's now explore as to the requirement that it has of us, the demands of being Jewish. Or for that matter, in the context of our parable, the demands of marriage. So let's return to that question now. We all in life do the very same thing. We all engage in signing a contract, accepting a contract without reading what's in there. Most of us human beings do that. Where do we do that? Where is the one area in our life where we sign a contract without reading what's in there, without knowing what it involves? Where?
Our professional lives.
Well, professional lives, you usually read your contract. You read how many sick days you have. right? Typically, you'll read the contract and you'll want to know what the requirements are and whether or not you want to live with it. Typically, well, does it happen that sometimes we go into something without thinking too much? Yeah, maybe when we just got out of college, but as we get older, we're more and more careful and cautious of signing something and getting into something that we don't know what it entails. But there's one area in life where we always go in without knowing what it entails, without reading the equivalent of reading the contract, and that is marriage. Now, when you talk about marriage, you say to yourself, well, we date each other, we get to know each other, we don't just get married. And my answer to you is, yes, people do date and people do get to know each other. And even if you get to know each other very well, even if you're scratching beneath the surface, it's impossible to know what demands will present itself in the course of life, right? In addition to fathom and to be able to speculate and to be able to anticipate. But in addition to that, even if you have a great imagination and you have a great computer program that has an incredible algorithm that can kind of help you go into the future and see, based on the way the person is today, what will they be like in 10 years? The reality is that people change. So even if you think you know the person today well, you don't know what they may be like in 10 years, how they might change, and what their demands or expectations might be then. So we're really going into something when you get married that we have no idea where it's going to lead, if we're going to be honest. So, but that's the very definition of marriage. We're committing to provide whatever our spouse might need. It's a lifetime of contractual agreement, of service, and that we're happy to do it. Why is that? Why is it that we're happy to do it? Even though we really don't know what it's going to bring, what is going to entail, what it's going to evolve to. And the answer is that marriage is essentially not a commitment to service. Marriage is a connection with a person. Like we said before, if you want to get the essence of marriage, it's a connection with a person. It's not about a commitment to service, even though it does involve a commitment to service, but that's not what the essence of it is. That's a byproduct. So, if to better describe how we do for each other, or what we do for each other, and how we are of a service to each other in marriage, the best way to describe it is, because we are in this deep connection, this deep bond, we don't view the tasks that might come with it. Let's say your spouse asks you to stop off and go to the shoe store and pick up something, or pick up the groceries, whatever it might be. We don't view that task as a task that is burdensome and is difficult. You view that task as an opportunity to make the person you love happy. You really see it as an opportunity, right? That's in essence what it is. What is the greatest gift you can sometimes give a person you love? You ever bought your spouse a gift? I'm sure everybody bought their spouse a gift, right? At some point, at least one. You might have bought the wrong gift. Al, you might have bought your wife a cookbook at some point.
Never.
Or a drill, and you discover it's not the right gift, but we buy gifts, right? What is the greatest gift you have ever given?
Time.
What?
The gift of time, giving someone the gift of your time.
The gift of time is quality time is a very important gift. It's probably much more precious than the tangible gifts that we give. What's an even greater gift than the gift of time?
Yourself.
Yourself. Well, I think that's somewhat related to the gift of time. One of the greatest gifts you can give a person you love is the opportunity and to allow them to do something for you, to make you happy. We sometimes become so self-sufficient and self-reliant that we don't want anybody to do anything for us. sometimes the biggest gift we can give somebody who really cares about us is to allow them to do something for us. It's not always easy to accept, but it's really a very important opportunity for the person that loves us to be able to give us something and to make us happy, to give them opportunity to make us happy, to allow them to make us happy. Do you ever find that the person that you love so much sometimes doesn't give you that opportunity? You don't have to answer the question, just think about it. Giving them the opportunity to make you happy is a gift in its own right. So when you ask a stranger for a favor, what does the stranger focus on? The stranger focuses on the task. How much time the task will take, how much energy, how much sweat. That's how a stranger looks at a request as a favor. It's a burden. When we ask a spouse for a favor, what does the spouse focus on? The spouse focuses on not the task, but on us. It's not about the task, it's about the person they love. If this task is something that the person I love will find meaningful, will appreciate, will make them happy, I'm going to do it. I would love for the opportunity to make the person I love happy. Now, I know I'm coming across sounding idealistic, and I'm very aware of the fact that life has stresses, and sometimes you don't have time and you're exhausted. But if you think about a couple of a week or 2 weeks in your life that things are calm and you don't have to deal with stress and you're just living your life, I think we can all relate to the fact that we enjoy the opportunity to do something that will make the person we love happy. And it's really a special moment. So when a spouse is asking to do something, we don't focus on the action, we're focusing on the person. This is something I can do for the person. Doesn't matter what the thing is. The thing becomes irrelevant. It's about the person. A stranger thinks about the task because they don't care about the person. Once you care about the person, once a person is the person in your life, the most important person in your life, anything you can do to make them happy. As the verse says, to quote Genesis 92, yes, honey. Right? You familiar with that verse? So, I think it was a fellow by the name of Gary Chapman. You heard of that fellow? He wrote a book in the 90s. You know the title of the book? The 5 Love Languages. Right? The 5 languages of love, the 5 ways we express love for the person in our life, right? Words of affirmation, acts of service, touch, whatever it is, you know, 5 love languages. He talked about the 5 ways we express and share our love. One of the 5 love languages he spoke about are acts of service. We do an act of service for the person, for our spouse. That's one of the ways we express our love. And that's one of the ways our spouse feels the love. But his whole theory is that most human beings in marriage have the 2 languages or the 3 languages are the most important to them. And a spouse should learn what are their spouse's primary expressions of love or love languages, right? The ones that get to them most, the ones that are most important to them. That's his general idea and theory, right? Very popular book. But the basic premise is that act of service is a way of expressing our love, meaning to say that when you do an act of service for the person you love, it's really not about what the act is, it's about the fact that it connects the 2 of you. So the act and the service becomes something much greater, becomes part of the connection, part of a bond. So every act of service strengthens a bond between husband and wife. It's about the connection. When our spouse goes out on a stormy night to do something for us, they're proclaiming how much you mean to them, right? That dedication. And when they return and we recognize how much they mean to us, what happens as a result of it? The connection becomes stronger. The mutual love continues to build. The mitzvot of the Torah, you know how we should refer to the mitzvot of the Torah? As Gary Chapman said, acts of service. It's one of the love languages. As far as it is with God, it is the primary love language, right? As Chapman says in his book, you have to know what your spouse's primary love language is. The primary love language for Hashem, for God, is acts of service. When we do a mitzvah, we're doing an act of service. So Hashem gets great pleasure, nachas ruach, nachas, that he issues forth a request in the Torah, and we take the time to do it. So these acts, these mitzvot that we do are not just mitzvot that make us better people, make our environment a better place, make our world a kinder universe, but these are also acts that strengthen the bond and relationship of us with Hashem and Hashem with us. And like in a marriage, sometimes in the context of the connection, the actual act is not what's important, but it's the fact that that's what matters to your spouse. Similarly, it's the mitzvot that matters to Hashem that allows us to connect and bond and express that closeness. So when Hashem offered us in the Torah all these do's and all these don'ts, we embraced it at once. We didn't see them as burdens because we saw them for what they are, means that we can have a relationship with God. The mitzvot are the vehicle that help deepen that relationship and the bond with God. So just like in marriage, we don't ask the question, how could you get married? You never know what your spouse will want you to do. And what's the answer to that? It's true, I don't know. But this relationship, this bond with this special person is so special to me. And if there's something down the road that I might be expected or might be asked to do, I will embrace that opportunity and that moment as a way of deepening that connection. I would do anything to deepen the connection with the person that matters most to me. So each mitzvah, each act of service is an opportunity to strengthen the connection because the focus is on the person, not on the act. So the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe shares an important, a very beautiful idea. And the Alter Rebbe highlights how we prepared ourselves for the giving of the Torah and frames it in this way of a relationship between two lovers, between a husband and wife. How God scooped us up, if you will, and courted us. Look at number 2, text number 2, Tanya chapter 46. God forsook the higher and lower realms, choosing none of them, but Israel his people, whom he brought out of Egypt. The obscenity of the earth, the place of spiritual filth and impurity, not through an angel nor through a messenger, but God himself in his glory descended there. As the verse states, I descended to save them from the hands of the Egyptians in order to bring them near to me, to his true essence and unity with a genuine soul attachment, like a man who betrothed a wife so that she would be united with him in a perfect bond. As the verse states, and he shall cleave to his wife and they shall be one flesh. Exactly similar and infinitely surpassing it is the union of the divine soul that is engaged in Torah and the commandments with the light of the infinite God. Clearly, the Tanya rolling this into the analogy of a husband and wife, as God scooped us up from Egypt, took us out of this dirty place, spiritually dirty, cuddled us and embraced us and took us to Mount Sinai, where we consummated our marriage. The deeds. So God is telling us, what is God telling us? That our behavior matters to him because we matter to him. Of all the creatures of all the creatures in the universe, we alone matter to God in that way. Of course, everybody matters to God, but there's a certain depth to a relationship to the spouse that what the spouse does impacts you more than what anybody else does. If somebody hurls an insult to you in the street, right? You let it roll off your back. Doesn't bother you. You're a big guy, you're a big girl, you can handle it. But when you hear the same thing from a spouse, it's intolerable. It's hurtful to a much deeper way. When you're sharing your life with somebody in such a deep level, their actions matter so much more because they matter more. So why does Hashem care about all these mitzvot? Because Hashem cares about us. If we were some stranger in the street, it wouldn't matter. But we are in such a deep relationship, such an intimate bond. So there's a fascinating concept in Chassidus, a deep concept in Chassidus that goes like this. Every yeshiva boy studies this concept, and it's one of the entry points in Hasidic study. I want you to listen to it in Hebrew and see if you could memorize it in Hebrew. Ilu nitztavinu lachtov eitzim. Let's do it slowly. Ilu
Ilu,
nitztavinu
Itzkavino,
lachtov
Lacto,
eitzim,
Eitzu.
which means even if we would have been commanded to chop wood instead of putting on tefillin, we would have done that too. What is that saying? What Chassidus is imparting to us, the message that Chassidus is imparting to us, that God gave us 613 commandments. And each commandment refines us in a certain way. Each commandment improves our environment and improves our world and improves the lives of others in certain ways. And those are all true. But what Chassidus is telling us is something much deeper in the mitzvah. If we would have been told, instead of to put on tefillin, to chop wood, we would have done that too. What is that expressing? It's expressing the fact that deeper than all the other facets of the mitzvot, which appeal to us in some way, some do, some don't. Some we appreciate, some we don't appreciate. Beneath all of that, there's an element to the mitzvah which it doesn't matter what the deed is. It's that we can do something for God. It's the fact that we have something that helps us deepen that connection. It's an act of service. That's all that matters. One day it's tefillin, another day it's Shabbos and kosher. Doesn't matter. It's an act of service. I get to do an act of service for God. There's nothing better than that. So if we can reach that level, when we realize that a mitzvah is an act of service, a mitzvah deepens the relationship. And regardless of whether we appreciate that mitzvah for the specifics of the mitzvah, sometimes if we're looking at the mitzvah and we're looking at the specifics of it and how it enhances our life and what we understand of it, to some degree we're missing the point. Now, I often encourage people to try to relate to the mitzvah and try to understand it and appreciate it because it helps us continue doing it. So it's good to relate to the mitzvah, to the ways in which it enhances our life and enhances the world. And that's good. It's a positive thing. But at the same time, if we're sitting and having an honest conversation, we have to also keep in mind that if we're too caught up in the beauty of the mitzvah, we're kind of missing the point. It's almost like your wife would tell you, honey, would you do me a favor and cut the weeds in the garden, right? What do you want to hear him say? You want to hear him say yes? Do you want to hear him say, honey, I love cutting the weeds. It's my favorite task. That's a disappointing answer. The answer you want to hear is, honey, for you, anything, right? I'll do it in spite of the fact that I don't really care for it or love it, but I'm doing it for you. Happily, not begrudgingly, but happily. So there's a certain beauty in being able to do an act of service when we don't appreciate it, when we don't connect to it personally, when we don't yet relate to it intellectually or emotionally, but we're doing it as an act of service. We're doing it because you matter to me. And the same thing with Hashem. If we can advance our mitzvah observance, if not all of them, but some of them, to do a mitzvah that we don't like. If until this year Shavuot we only did mitzvot that we appreciate, start doing one mitzvah that you don't really relate to yet. You don't really appreciate. You haven't connected to it, but do it because God said so. Had we been commanded to chop wood, we would have done that too. Because an opportunity to do an act of service is an opportunity to make my beloved happy and an opportunity to deepen that intimate bond. So what happened when God offered the Torah to the other nations? Everyone refused to accept it, except our ancestors, because each nation focused on the Torah. This is an unexpected turn here in the tonight's class, right? Always has to be an unexpected turn and curve, right? All the nations, you know why they didn't accept the Torah? Because they were focused on the Torah. And the Jews accepted the Torah because they were focused on God. The nation said, you're offering us the Torah? Let me examine what the Torah is. The Jew says, you're offering us the Torah? That's an opportunity to connect to you. Anything, any opportunity to connect to you, I'm taking. There's nothing more precious than you. The Jews didn't get sidetracked with the Torah. The nations did. The Jews didn't get caught up with the Torah. The nations of the world did. The Jewish people were focused on the gold. They weren't sidetracked with the tantalizing dishes, intellectual dishes. The Jews were focused like a laser. The prize here is God. And they weren't going to allow the Torah to distract them. That's very deep, but think about it. You caught that? They weren't going to let the Torah distract them. They says, if it's coming from God, I'm in all the way. So this is the thrust of tonight's idea. There's more on the subject that we need to explore, but not everything could be crammed into an hour and 15 minutes, and I'm already 15 minutes over time. So I intend to further explore the next step of this conversation, a Monday night, Shavuot night. We're going to do Torah study, late night Torah study at 10 p.m. at the patio. The patio at the Core Family Home. It's 10 p.m. We're going to have some nosh for Ruvain, some Coca-Cola, and what do you call that drink? The skinny bottles. What do you call it? Red Bull. Bring back your college days. Pull off all-nighter. Come on. Bring back your youthful spirit. Don't come for the whole night. Just come from 10 to 12. Break out of your box a little bit. We'll do some late night Torah study. We'll have a lot of fun. So this is the idea. Any questions, any thoughts, any objections, overrulings?
Yes, Rabbi.
Yes, Chaim.
Okay. The question you brought up about Hashem giving offering the Torah to different groups, and you said, how did he do it, etc. I was under the impression that, should I say, the only one who physically has ever seen Hashem is Moshe. And when he communicated with Abraham or anybody else, it was in dreams.
So
Yes or no? So in other
Um,
words, when he brought it to the Arabs, say,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
they
So
said,
Herman,
you
you're
know,
Herman, you're
they
on target.
a dream to their leader, and he would have said, I can't do that. We believe in multiple marriages.
Right. It's true that Moshe stands out even to the prophets and even Abraham and the prophets throughout the generations. God didn't quite reveal his essence to them like he did to Moses. Moses experienced a revelation and an intimacy with God like no other. But at the same time, the Jewish people as a whole, one time in history, experienced that intimacy. That was when God gave the Torah at Mount Sinai. That was the one exception, one time, one moment that God and the Jewish people are as one. When God gave the Torah, he shared himself like he did in no other time. So what Moses had as a leader, the Jewish people had at Mount Sinai and possibly even beyond. So Mount Sinai was the one moment in history where Hashem shared himself. Absolutely. Yes, Terry, go ahead.
Could it be that Hashem knew that the others would say no?
I would say that Hashem knows, Hashem was, but Hashem still offered it to them because they should never come along and say, had you offered it to us, why didn't you offer it to us? Why don't you give us a chance? So Hashem saying, I'm giving you a chance, right? The Jews claim to be the chosen people. Well, had God offered it to us, we could have been, no, God offered it to you, you weren't interested. You rejected the sale. It's like sometimes, there's something on the market and everybody passes it by. Nobody realizes just how much of a gem it is. And somebody comes by and sees how much potential it has, is able to have that vision and see the beauty, right? Some houses just have no appeal, no curb appeal. But people who have a vision can come along and say, I see this really has potential. And scoops it up, and then everybody comes along a year later and sees what the person did with it and said, oh, I could have had that, right? I could have bought Apple when it was $5 a share. Yeah, you could have, and you didn't. So don't complain to me now. I could have, and I did. And now I'm a multi-billionaire. So in spiritual terms or in life enrichment as well, Hashem said to everybody, anybody can have it. I'm offering it to anybody. Whoever wants to come take it. He offered it to each one. They rejected it. You rejected it. It's your loss. Don't come kvetching later.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned in terms of describing the concept of the mitzvot, it's that we're doing something for our spouse that makes our spouse happy, that we would be happy to even chop wood would be. Now, my question, I remember learning before that the term mitzvah is also the word meaning a connection between the person making the request and the person who's fulfilling the request. Like the professor who asked the janitor to get him a Coca-Cola drink, then the janitor feels a connection to the professor, even though they're very different in their terms of education. So my question is this the same concept that you're talking about in terms of our doing something that our spouse wants when we want to do the chop the wood or cut the weeds? Is that
because
concept is making the connection between?
because there's many facets to a deed and there's many facets to a mitzvah.
Right.
But the deepest and most profound way of looking at it and seeing it and experiencing it is experiencing the connection that results of it.
Got it. That's why even chopping wood would be
Right. So
important.
right. So the specifics of the deed, when you're considering the closeness that results, the bond that is deepened, when you consider that part of the mitzvah, then what the deed is becomes less important. The fact that it is something that is meaningful to the person we love, that becomes the most important thing.
Right.
So it's an opportunity, like you said, you have an opportunity to connect with somebody, that you hold in such high esteem, that you consider so important and so valuable in your life. And yeah, it doesn't matter. And it's true, life gets busy and hectic, and sometimes we don't have time to do things that we don't time to appreciate. But if you're able to slow down all the noise for a moment and just appreciate the other person in your life, and just think about how every deed that you do for each other brings you closer, it's really magnificent. And life just gets into the fast pace so often, and we kind of forget, we kind of lose track of it, we kind of overwhelmed with all the tasks we have to do to stay afloat. But when you take time out just to stop and focus on what's important, and when you have the peace of mind, you actually cherish that moment where you can do something for each other.
Right. That's very powerful. It gives so much more meaning to the whole concept of the mitzvah, or the words.
Yes.
and
So every
instruction.
year, we receive the Torah anew. Every year, God gives us the Torah anew. But every year, it's for us also to step forward anew and to
Right.
embrace this very dimension of the mitzvah. So if we can just take one mitzvah, and even if we don't start doing it regularly, but take one mitzvah that you don't really can feel a connection to, and start doing it, either as a one-time thing or on a regular basis, that would really be taking this idea and
Right.
and translating into a practical, because everything should be brought in Hamaisa Hueker, everything should be brought into practice. So it's
Right.
not just a theoretical conversation, but it's a theoretical conversation that guides our relationship with Hashem.
Wow. It
But
also gives a lot of meaning in terms of our relationship with our wife, or
100%.
husband. It's amazing.
Imagine if every young couple, before they got married, before we go for an account, before we become an accountant, we go for training in accounting. Before you become a plumber,
Right.
you go to school to learn how to be a plumber. The most important thing we do in our life, to get married, how much time and thought do we take to proceed with the proper mindset? Imagine if people, actually did some coaching, got some coaching or some counseling or some studying before they got married.
Right.
It's a subject that should be explored intellectually, emotionally, what it is. And with such an attitude, it just changes the whole
Right. A paradigm shift.
the whole paradigm. And the truth of the matter is, the wisdom of the Torah is the most refined wisdom. And in fact, in 1992, this guy finally pinpointed active service. He pinpointed something and put it into language of modern man and woman that has been in the Torah for thousands of years. And he was able to articulate it. And this is exactly what the Torah is saying.
Wow.
A question. With
Yes.
that, with all what we talked about with marriage in
Yes.
that sense, how is it that traditionally, and I have never read it in the Torah, I don't think, unless it's snuck in there somewhere that I didn't see it, that traditionally in the old Jewish custom, the family decided on the bride, who the daughter was going to marry, and may not even meet that person until the day of their marriage. So that would not relate to a bonding of people. I mean, other than after years of being together, they might get that way. I'm trying to figure out if I can understand what we're saying
So,
today in today's world. I don't understand it 500 years ago, 800 years ago, or 1,000.
a few points here. Um, number one, Chai Vela? Number one, the fact that a woman and a man are arranged and they don't meet each other beforehand, that's a concept that is very true in Hollywood. The way Hollywood likes to portray the life back then. Fiddler on the Roof, right?
Well,
Um,
a lot of them,
the truth of the matter is that there are communities, even today, that are closer to what you're describing. I wouldn't say it's exactly the way you're describing, but a little closer to what you're describing. But in most communities, even very religious communities, there is courtship that precedes marriage. In fact, it actually says in the Talmud that a person should be able to see the person and spend time with the person, to be able to get to know the person and so on. It's a positive thing. It's an important thing. But so in some communities, the courtship is a little more elaborate, a little longer. Some of them it's shorter and condensed. Be it as it may, let's even take the typical norm in America where the courtship could last a year or two, right? It doesn't change the fundamentals of marriage. It doesn't necessarily even make the fundamentals better. And no matter how long you had a courtship, you still don't know the person 100%. So, and the reality is that the true bond doesn't start till after marriage.
that I go with, yes.
So, regardless of how long the courtship was, if a person wants to make the marriage right and happy and proper and wants it to work, and wants it to be rich and fulfilling, this is the attitude that one must take. So it's really, regardless of how long the courtship is, this is the kind of attitude that has the potential to make the marriage deep and meaningful. So the success of the marriage is not dependent on the length of the courtship, but on the depth of the attitudes.
Okay.
I'm not dismissing or discounting the idea of courtship. It's important. We dated, I dated, Chaya dated, we do, we both dated other people before we dated each other. So it's important, it's definitely important. But ultimately, the success of marriage and the richness of marriage and the depth of marriage is all dependent on the above mentioned.
True. Okay.
So God willing, next week on Wednesday night, we will do the final class of this series, which will be the unity one, which was otherwise labeled as number 3. And I also remind you that Monday night, we're having a late night study at my house. You're invited to come. You can stay for as long as you want. And Monday morning, we read the 10 Commandments in the synagogue at 9:30. We're having a second reading at Monday evening at 6 p.m. in the tent, together with our spring party, Dairy Fest, our traditional dairy dinner that we have in honor of the holiday of Shavuot. Hope you'll join us. It's a great way of celebrating our relationship. Remember, a wedding is a happy day, so we're supposed to celebrate. It's a wedding celebration, equivalent of it. And Tuesday morning services again 9:30, with Yisker memorial service about 11ish.
So the study night is Monday night, not Sunday night.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said Monday night. My apologies. The study night is Sunday night.
Mm.
I'm coming right out. Sunday night. Sunday night at 10 p.m. at my house, at our house. My apologies. Thank you. Yes, Sunday night. The eve of Shavuot. Stay healthy, everybody. Stay well. Great studying
Thank you.
together.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care. Have a good night.
See you in the
See you in the
morning,
morning.
hopefully.
Heidi, good to see you. See you in the morning.
Great class, Rabbi. Thank
Thank you.
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Heidi, you wanted to say something?
No, no, I
I
was
want
just,
to see you in the morning.
Yes, we'll see you in the morning. Yes. I love the background there.
me, it's still daytime.
Yes, yes. Take care. Good night, everybody.